Welcome back to Daybreak. I'm Victoria Rubadiri. Let me introduce my guest joining me in studio really quickly. To my left, we have Njeri Maina, a lawyer and co-founder of Akia. Next to her is Moses Kilonzo, a chairperson of persons living with disabilities, I beg your pardon, Lower Eastern. Waithera Gaido, vice chair of the ICT Youth Sector Board within KEPSA. And we also have Suleiman Bashir, a lawyer. Thank you all for joining me as we continue our conversation on youth and politics. A lot has happened this weekend. Of course, will happen tomorrow with the Azimio la Umoja NDC, where they expect to announce Raila Odinga as the flag bearer. But I want to get your take on something that happened earlier this week, which was the handshake anniversary, and basically what that has meant over the last 4 years, particularly for youth. Has it yielded anything in terms of benefits? You know, there's been arguments in the political space and seeing that it really has given advantages to those in the political class. Not much is felt necessarily by Kenyan citizens, but, you know, Njeri, let me get your take on 4 years on. Do you feel the difference of that handshake between Raila Odinga and President Uhuru Kenyatta back in 2018?
I think if I were to speak from a young person's perspective, the handshake has not impacted the youth in any way, because we have seen the issues that plague the young people of this nation continue to plague them even after the handshake. There's very high levels of unemployment, and I can tell you for a fact, because I finished my campus education in 2016, and I know a couple of my friends who up to date have never gotten any kind of employment, and they have resulted to maybe online writing or business. So the handshake has not impacted young people. It benefited certain people in the political class, but as far as the youth are concerned, we still have the same issues plaguing us.
You know, Moses, let me get your take on that in terms of, you know, persons living with disabilities. It's a key demographic, over 1 million. When you're talking about a voting bloc, do you feel you're being tapped into? And with a deal like the handshake, were there any yields for people living with disabilities in this country?
I would say yes and no, because first, as a person living with disability and most importantly, as a youth in Kenya, handshake has provided a platform where we can now judge the president, whatever he has been doing. Because you remember after the handshake, he said that he was not able to, you know, in his first term to work properly with his deputy. So post-handshake, he is now very comfortable and he is working. So at least now we can judge him and ask the president. Now you told us after the handshake, you've been comfortable, you can now work. Now what have you done after the handshake? So it's very key for me, because if it had never happened, then the president would maybe use his deputy as an scapegoat, you know, to try and say he has frustrated me for the 2 terms, I've never worked, but now we can judge him. And on the other side, the handshake, after the handshake, we really expected a lot. Looking at the coalition government, you know, Raila and Kibaki, whatever it was able to deliver, many of us expected, you know, when the president said he has, you know, shaken hands with Raila, and we now expect them to be consulting each other, you know, in matters development. We expected a lot, but that has never been achieved. We have actually not seen a lot being achieved. So in one way or the other, it's just another political move.
You know, Suleiman, Moses mentioned something really interesting. The president said, I can now work now after the handshake. But, you know, the Deputy President William Ruto kind of giving an opposite view, saying the handshake destroyed the Big Four agenda. You know, we weren't able to carry out our mandate, especially in the second term. You know, what do you make of what's been going on now, you know, at least 4 years on after the handshake?
I think you see, Victoria, when you look at the period that we've had just prior to the handshake, we have had a country that has gone through a very tumultuous period. We have had businesses getting disrupted, a lot of protests within the CBD, in other towns and all that, gunshots, people were getting killed and all that. So I think in one way, the handshake has restored normalcy, peace and tranquility. And I think whenever we have peace, part of those who greatly benefit are those who belong to the youth bracket. I think that's one positive thing that we can easily acknowledge. And I think with peace and tranquility, businesses end up thriving. The economy might change for the better. Those are some of the pros that we may talk about that have come about with the handshake. But I think looking at it on the other part, we have had, just because of the handshake, a government that has actually absorbed the opposition. And you know, ordinarily, for a government to thrive, you need that check and balance. And part of the check, the animal that is supposed to conduct a check on the government of the day is the opposition. I think that what has happened is the opposition end up getting subsumed into the government. And I think for the last 4 years, we have had a government that is just the government. We have not had any opposition, and we have not had any checker on the part of the government. Right. I think the end product now has become a government, especially the faction that is led by the deputy president, who has ended up assuming the role of the opposition. I think now, and I think that is not what the constitution envisages, because ordinarily these two are elected on the basis of the Jubilee Manifesto, and I think in accordance with that, they have had certain objectives to achieve for the people of this republic. And I think that has not really happened in a way. It is because the party leader is the president and the deputy party leader is our deputy president. Right. And as much as we may boast about the level of infrastructure that has happened, I think politically speaking, a lot has actually gotten so disoriented. A lot has come out as unplanned, and I think we now have an opposition that is within the government and a government that is now in the opposition.
Which is what the Deputy President called a conundrum in government. You know, essentially, he's become the de facto opposition leader. But, you know, Waithera, let me come to you, because Suleiman talked about we don't have the issue of the tear gas Mondays anymore from 2017 after the handshake. But do you feel that it has really created a conducive environment? I mean, you represent the Apex lobby group for businesses in this country, KEPSA. Do you feel it made a difference, at least for the business community?
What I would say is that, peace is not just the absence of war. Peace is actually, first and foremost, a state of mind. So an empty stomach means that that person is actually lacking peace. Yeah? Now, if the state of Kenya was a car, then the private sector would be the engine of that car. What the handshake then brought about, and I believe one of the underlying factors was, or rather principles, was actually that we need peace in order to have an enabling environment. So of course, with the onset of the pandemic, that also interrupted a lot of plans, particularly the achievement of the Big Four agenda. But it actually did create a conducive environment whereby now people were able to focus on building the economy. So I would say somewhat, it did actually contribute. You know,
we've been seeing a lot of political deals, I mean, for obvious reasons, being formed now as we're getting to the elections. One big one will be tomorrow at the NDC for Azimio la Umoja. But, you know, the big question has always been, but where are the youth? Where are the young faces, especially when they're trying to put together who will be where, doing what? You know, Jerry, when you think through how more young people can break into a lot of those structures, how does that happen effectively as the new governments will be formed in the next few months?
I think what I can say is with certainty, we do not have systems that intentionally support young people to be in politics. I am vying for political position for Kirinyaga Women Representative, and the challenges are insurmountable. You find that mostly in the political arena, youths are normally used as foot soldiers. So with the people who are, you know, rallying people together, doing all those activations, leading the lobby groups. But when you come to the real cake, the table where people are sitting to make decisions which are impactful, the youth are not there. So what we lack is intention, Victoria, because I believe the youth are capable, and they're very they're very present, and they want to be involved in the process. But when the intention is lacking, then we will not find the youth there. So I think we need goodwill from the political bigwigs in Kenya to even lend ear to the conversation of youths being on the table where decision-making is happening. And at the end of the day, you find that even in the political parties, the big political parties, mostly young people are disenfranchised. running for political office in Kenya is expensive.
Yeah.
And sometimes people say, oh, you don't need money, you just need to go sell your agenda. I can tell you on the ground, the reality is very different. People do not care a lot about agenda. We have set up systems in Kenya where the political world only operates on money. That is what people are influenced by. So at the end of the day, we need the goodwill and the intention to ensure that young people are actually involved. For example, during those NDCs, where the young people, we want to see the young faces there. Because they have so many challenges, we want someone to at least give them that space and excuse them and say, hey, we see you, we know that you're capable, and we will actually place you here.
You know, you mentioned something, placing, and some people equate that to, well, there's nominations, you know, especially for many of the groups that are considered, quote unquote, marginalized: youth, people living with disabilities, women, you know, and then we see a lot of the affirmative action seats and whatnot. Do you feel, let me come to you on that, Moses, that is good, at least in terms of first entry into the political space and then eventually go for elective seats, or should people actually push to get voted in at the ballot? What do you feel is the easiest way to kind of get into the political space and get a voice?
First, the 2010 Constitution, you know, made sure that the nominations are there for these marginalized groups. And it was for a reason, because the drafters of the Constitution saw it wise for the marginalized groups to be nominated and showcase their potential so that people may elect them. But what has been happening is that these nominations have been used by political parties as rewards to, you know, loyalists and maybe financiers of political parties, and that's why the marginalized groups have never been getting these nominations on merit. As persons living with disability, we are gravely concerned with this situation, because it leaves us, or rather the people who are nominated in these positions do not clearly depict, you know, the leadership in skills and capabilities in the physically challenged persons. And, you know, we get to be judged by the actions of those who are in these positions. And the community need to understand some few things about people living with disabilities. You know, they possess very unique talent. Persons living with disabilities have unique capabilities, and they need to tap into this. And living with disability did not just come the other day in this world. If you read history books, you will see all over persons living with disabilities, books which were written for over 2,000 years ago. For instance, the Bible, you will see Jesus Christ, you know, healing visually impaired persons. So it tells you that physically challenged persons have been there. They are part and parcel of this society. And so they should not be seen as if they are aliens from, you know, another planet. And, you know, they need to be planned for and never given a chance to plan, and never given chance, you know, to take you know, to take part in building this country. And so it is something that we actually need to correct in matters leadership and politics of this country.
You know, I wonder, yesterday I was in Kayole, I was speaking to, you know, a few young people about just this election cycle and some of their expectations, Suleiman. And, you know, the thing that kept coming up in the conversation was youth make up most of the electorate, at least in terms of, you know, registered voters, more than 50%. They are 75% of the population. But why is it not translating in terms of them voting in their own, or them even wanting to vie? Why do you feel there's a disconnect?
I think over time, what we have had in our country was a clear lack of what I would call political grooming. You know, we have had a scenario whereby the top political class have always tried to control this youth population in a way that they will not be able to improve themselves economically, financially, and politically. I think for them to succeed in what they do, especially this top or old political class, what they normally do is they have put us in a box. They have actually introduced the aspect or the concept of political handouts. They made us rely on this particular handout so that we don't even end up analyzing or looking at them on the basis of what they shall do for us. And I think that particular tradition is what has actually made them control this youth and youth population. But I think on the other part, Victoria, for me, I may not easily side with a youthful aspirant who will say that I'm not able to traverse or I'm not able to make inroads or be successful in this because of political handouts and political cronyism and all that. We have the examples of, I think, the youngest MP is Mwirigi. I think there's an MP from Mount Kenya region who has actually been able to get elected on the basis of what he has, on the basis of the kind of campaigns he had mounted. And I think as a country, we're at a point whereby 75% of our population is the youth population. Yeah. That tells us that the kind of voters that we need to tap for any I think, young aspirant. And I think on the other part, if you look at the projections between 2013 and 2017 and the election that is now facing our country, I think in the year 2017, the youth population in our county assemblies and national parliament, the face of parliament has changed. We have a considerable number of them. I think they now constitute about 30%. That's a good number. But the problem is those who have now been elected to those offices have not done things different. And I think that is what is making the youth despair in electing youthful, those who are within the youthful brackets to those particular positions. The other problem that we have had is those particular young minds who were elected ended up singing to the tunes of those political demigods. They did not end up coming with their own independent minds so that they're able to maybe push through their own agendas. So what is happening is the youth who have been elected did not end up promoting the interest of the youth. Just to give an example, we have had the Public Procurement Amendment Law that was passed that was actually designed to improve the interest of the youth. That law is yet to be operationalized. We also have the one for the National Employment Act. Certain bits of it are yet to be operationalized. Who do we expect to enforce these particular bits of those laws? It is those youthful aspirants. Those are the ones who we actually expected, because they are within our bracket. Those are the ones we expected to push through our interest. That has not happened. But all is not lost again. Even as we face this particular election, we again have an opportunity to audit those on the ballot and see which young mind will be able to push through our agenda. And I think we again have an opportunity. Who knows, this time around we may end up having more than 50% of those who will form the face of our parliament and the county assemblies within the youth bracket. But I think we are hopeful as a country. The only problem or the only worry we have is the politics of handout, and I think that is what has been killing us over time.
No, certainly it's definitely paralyzed that agency of the youth to occupy the democratic space. But, Waithera, I wonder from where you sit, in interacting with youth in the business sense, is there another way to mobilize them to kind of take power differently? It may not be through the ballot, but there's other avenues. And I wonder through KEPSA, are you finding new ways of mobilizing them to have a greater voice?
Yes, we are, because recently we've checked over the past about 10 years, KEPSA has actually been having a lot of youth enterprise programs with different partners. But I'd also like to maybe throw a spanner into the work and say, youth need to get organized. Okay? Now, if you've got 14 million youth aged between 18 and 35, let's look at it from an economic angle. If one young person, or rather if every one youth put 1 shilling, if they decide to organize themselves and put 1 shilling in an account, how much would they have instantly? 14 million shillings. If they put 5 shillings, how much would they have? 70 million shillings. What if they decide to just put 50 shillings? They would have 700 million shillings. And what if they just say, you know what? Let's all just remove 100 shillings every month. They would have about 1.4 billion or 1.5 billion shillings per month. Which bank would not want that bank account? Doesn't that give them the power to negotiate? Isn't it? Doesn't that give them the economies of scale they would require to create not just access to finance, but also access to market? What that means is that youth don't need to fight to be on anybody's table. It means they can create their own table. What is stopping them? 2 weeks ago, I was in a meeting, rather more like a workshop. that has brought together aspiring young politicians. So I would like to say in the defense of the youth, they are interested in politics. They are interested in running for different positions in the elections. But the question is this: what are they bringing to the table for the other youth? How well do you know your ward? Do you know the comparative advantage of your county? Do you know the comparative advantage of your ward? A political leader, well, the best definition of politics I've ever had is pursuit of self-interest, which could either be collective or individual. It could be positive or negative. Now, the private sector is apolitical because what drives it is profit, revenue, and impact. It gives an opportunity to anybody and everybody to be able to operate in it. So my question to the young people is, how well do they know the laws, the policies that actually support them? If you look at the agricultural sector growth and transformation strategy, it wants to create over 1 million jobs. If you look at the National Industrial Transformation Program, it wants to create over 1 million jobs. Those who are already in leadership, because we cannot say that there are no youth in leadership, what are they doing? How are they organized to ensure that all these opportunities are able to trickle down up to the village level? Agriculture is devolved, trade is devolved, cooperatives are devolved. Now, you may not be able to form one unit to put 14 million shillings, but you can organize yourselves into cooperatives. Who are you waiting for to organize you when the literacy rate in Kenya for a while has been at 94.4% for those aged between 18 to 24, which of course those are then those graduating. So that means that we have enough young leaders that if they organized themselves, then they would be able to actually set a table. So as the private sector, that is why we are supporting them with all the programs that the private sector is doing. The Kenya Association of Manufacturers has programs. KEPSA has got loads of programs. You know, we have a sector board that advocates, sits with the CSs, in this case, particularly the CS of youth, to advocate and push for the youth agenda and ensure that they have a role and a place to play. So what we are saying is that if there is peace, yes, we speak of unemployment, but there are opportunities. The thing is, in fact, I dare say, we are drowning in an ocean of opportunities. Every value chain has opportunities that are untapped. Where is the problem? I summarize it as get organized.
You know, you've raised a very serious point, which, I mean, half the time you hear a lot of people say there's no intentionality from the youth to really, and you talked about drowning in an ocean of opportunities. Are they seeking them out enough? And I wonder, Jerry, from where you sit, you know, Waithera has talked about funding. We could mobilize so quickly with, you know, a little money coming from each young person. But what else could be lacking? Is it civic education? Is it capacity building? You know, what more do the youth need to kind of push and motivate them into that direction of taking up leadership or just owning more of the democratic space, if you will?
I think it's easy to say that young people are disorganized because it's, you know, the first thing that comes to mind. And it's also easy to say that, you know, they depend on handouts. But Victoria, we have to look at the factors that inform these decision-making or that inform the disorganization or that inform maybe them depending on handouts. And at the end of the day, we cannot just say, or rather we can't just classify the youth as this or as this without looking at why they're that, okay? And that is why affirmative action was put in place. Because at the end of the day, you find that if, let's say we are watching a match. Let me just give an example, and maybe I'm shorter than Waithera, which is actually factual. And you place a seat, the same height, right? And we're supposed to watch the same match and the fence is a bit longer, right? She's actually going to get an advantage. So that is what we are not looking at. What has society conditioned the youth to know? They have been conditioned to know that they can't work together, that they're disorganized, that they can't form long-lasting alliances, because we find that even the alliances that are formed by young people, they last for but a short period of time, which is during the political period. So at the end of the day, we need first to inform the root cause, to know the root causes that inform these issues that plague young people, so that we can at least look at it from a very open-minded view, instead of just judging them and saying that, you know, the youth are disorganized or they're thieves or they're that. And I believe that even in the political space, it's just like the way we used to say, oh, women can't vote women, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they used to run around that women do not support other women. But why were women not supporting other women? We have seen that now people are trusting women in leadership. They know that women can deliver. And I think my colleague said that, you know, young people who are in the political space or who have those positions are not delivering. But we vote in the old people time and time again, yet they do not deliver. So why not vote? Why not vote even the young people? That is not an excuse. And at the end of the day, we have to push young people to ensure that they are in that space and they own it. But we cannot judge them and say that they're disorganized, because we have to first look at the factors informing those decisions. And you see, Victoria, like I said, intention lacks a lot. Mm. I know quite a number of young people who are vying for political positions. And even, you know, next month we're heading to nominations, party nominations. I think you gave an example of the youngest MP. I don't know where he stands right now, and I would not want to obviously speak to that. But that was a 1 in a million case. Is it impossible? No, it's not impossible. I could go traversing Kirinyaga County in a bicycle, you know, because now motorbikes have been banned. I could go traversing in a bicycle and you know, giving out my flyers and all that. But do we really want to push young people to that space? We can level the playing field for them. We can make it easier for them, which is why I say affirmative action is something that we should really look into, not just giving a few positions. We have so many young people in this country. We need to be in active positions. And I believe legislative measures can be put in place to ensure that young people are actually on the decision-making table. We can make our own table, but we want to be there in the decision-making table, because we do not want to seem like we're fighting with the other political classes, because at the end of the day, we need to tap in into these, you know, our seniors in the political spaces. Yeah. So let us all be on that table.
Yeah, there's that argument between, do you create your own table or do you join the existing one? But yeah, go ahead, Waithera.
First, let me make it clear. I was responding from a private sector angle. There is need for organization, because that's what private sector is about: systems, structures, and processes. When it comes to the political angle, I must say youth are actually organizing themselves. Why? Because right now, there are quite a number of groups coming up with a youth manifesto where they are saying, we no longer want to be told what you will do for us. We are now going to tell you what we want you to do for us. That already is young people in, or rather from the different political parties coming together, regardless of being from different political parties, and saying, can we together decide what do we want to see? And then go back to our parties and say, this is what the youth are asking for. But surely, if you are majority of the population, you can actually create very, very good systems and processes which actually gets the others to leave their table and come to yours, you know? It doesn't mean that you're not working with them. It just means that your table is stronger because you are the majority of the voters. So from the private sector angle, economics is important. Yeah? At the end of the day, the reason you want to be a leader is to be able, a good leader wants to do what? To ensure that resources are well distributed. As you said, not equality, but equity, you know, whereby everybody is given a fair standing so that they can all see at the same height. But at the end of the day, it has to be upon you to decide, you know, what ultimately you will deliver. And that the youth must decide for themselves. Nobody can decide for themselves. And that's why they're being drawn to the other table. But the truth is, they actually have the muscle and the power to create their own table and draw the other table to their side. I think they should try.
Suleiman, you wanted to respond to that?
I think Victoria, let's face it, there are two issues here. There's the political aspect or the political climate that we have in our country. Yeah. And on the other part, we have the economies of scale that are affecting the youth in our country. When we talk about, and I think I can hear my colleague from KEPSA, the theory she's giving us is the textbook theory. You know, the reality on the ground or what the youth in our country are facing is so different from what KEPSA might be looking at. And I think on the other part is when you bring in the theory of collecting coins, 1 shilling here and 2 shillings there, and how that would impact the youth of our country, I think it's being a bit blind to the issues affecting our youth. As a lawyer, we end up registering companies for the youth. At times, you end up commissioning documents for the youth. If one single young man sets up a cyber cafe in town, the number of approvals he or she is supposed to have before running that business are just out of this world. You know, I think the environment we have in our country is so disfavorable to the youth. It's also so disfavorable to investors. You know, one of the ways of improving our economy or one of the ways of creating a good environment of employments and businesses for the youth is to allow it is to be investor-friendly environment in our country. That has not been the case. Look at what happens with banks. You know, you cannot transact, I think, for more than 900,000 Kenyan shillings without explaining a lot of paperwork to the banks. All these things are making investors shun away from our country, and that is the end thing that is affecting our youth. So I think let's compare two things. Let's look at the reality that we have in our country. We have youth whose interests are well anchored under Article 27 and Article 56 of our Constitution. The youth are designed, I mean, the drafters of our Constitution have put them in the marginalized group, and that is the exact situation we are in, almost 10 years down the line. So our Constitution was promulgated around 2008. Today, we are in 2022, 14 years down the line. We are still talking about marginalization of the youth. Nothing has been done on their part. To be honest with you, the general environment that faces any young single graduate in our country is just so crazy. Employment, I mean, job opportunities are not there. Capital, I think ways of getting capital to maybe start a business are not there. The regulatory framework required of someone to start something is just crazy equally. So I think we are in a country whereby a lot needs to be changed. You know, it is not just the textbook bit of it. The reality that we have in our country is just crazy. And I think the way to change it is policy-wise, at the cabinet level, legal, I mean, also the kind of laws that we have in our parliaments. There are a lot of ways of even making sure that these requirements that are required of youth. Today, I think yesterday, even in the papers, there was an announcement, I think, made about more than 500 youth in our country of those who have applied for jobs at the judiciary. All of them were required to come up with, I think, clearance from the HELB, clearance from, I think, KRA, clearance from these, from various bodies. Right. That tells you that even getting that particular thing requires some money. You know, you need to pay some money for you to get those particular clearances. That is the kind of a country we're in. It is a reality that things are bad for the youth. No opportunities are there for them. The youth are in a very grim picture that we are in. It's a serious grim picture that is facing.
They certainly need to lower those barriers to entry, especially for the youth. On that note, let's take a very short break here on Daybreak. The conversation continues. Stay with us. Keep tweeting. The hashtag is Daybreak. I can see a couple of you tweeting. I'll read your comments when we come back.